we're gonna go ahead really quickly and do the tier, because I will forget. Okay, I get tier list requests all the time. I will forget to do these tier lists until like I have some free time. I'm going to preemptively, thank you so much Jason for the gifted, I'm going to preemptively try to also predict where I think Freddy will be. I have a pretty good idea and where he's going to be after the changes go through, and then this list should be fairly up to date on like what I think. As always with any kind of tier list, just remember, with tier lists, it's kind of my opinion. This is why I think at like the higher end of DBD, what's going to be super successful, what's not going to be super successful. And what that means is like the 1% of games that you play that are really, really difficult, these are going to be killers who will excel or not excel in these positions. If you are like the #1 Trickster main of the world and you think he's S tier, hey, good for you. I'm going to have to strongly disagree, but again, it's all my opinion in the end, and a tier list really doesn't matter for the vast majority of your games. We enjoy going over tier lists because they're kind of fun, and we have some different thoughts as maybe compared to other people. But let's go ahead, and I'm kind of just going to go down the list of what we have kind of popped up here, and I'm going to place the killers where I think they are and give a quick brief reasoning as to why. And then it won't be anything as in-depth, maybe as like Odds does, but hopefully it'll be something pretty quick that gives you an idea of where I think all the killers are currently. Starting off though, I'm just going to go right here down this list as we do have Trapper. Trapper is still D tier. Trapper will probably always be D tier. I don't necessarily have a problem with Trapper. I actually put a lot of time onto Trapper. He's probably one of my better killers of the game. But whenever it comes down to like dealing with higher end, like survive with friend groups, they're going to normally have one person following you, like disarming your traps, or even like while you're in mid chase, disarming a trap. And it can make Trapper's Nightmare really, really brutal, especially if you're going with something like a setup Trapper. If you guys don't know what that is, there's numerous ways of which you can play Trapper. I have a whole bunch listed on my channel right now. But with that being said, Trapper is just kind of, what I say, dissembled by by Swifts and good Swifts in general. And even if you are a really, really good Trapper, you're going to be struggling against some of the top-notch groups of DBD. Wraith. Wraith is a weird one. I'm biased, okay? I'm really biased when it comes down to like playing with Wraith. I think Wraith is kind of like a hidden, really not hidden strong, but I think he could actually be, I'm going to put him in B tier. And that's me being generous. I'm really biased though with Wraith. Wraith has the ability of catching off even really high top-notch Swifts. The invisibility is a lot better, and when they made buffs to him a long time ago, you now have the invisibility take it's a shorter distance when you can tell. You're relying on a lot more sound audio cues, and depending on the map, you're going to be doing really well. And one of the things about maps, it doesn't really affect Wraith. He can kind of perform on all maps, whereas someone like Huntress and Larry's are not really getting, you know, great value. Hit and run strategy is probably his best strategy, but he does have some cool things you can pull off thanks to his lunge out of stealth that you will see at very high-end levels of gameplay. And if anyone has like a hard time and says you'll never beat a good group with Wraith, like a good Swift group, I can go back. I think Team Eternal lost to a Wraith in a competitive game. So in comp, Wraith is also done pretty well. Now, to be fair, there's rules there. But I do think Wraith is a lot stronger than people give credit for, even against Swifts. The amount of callouts that you need to be able to handle Wraith is insane. And most Swifts, even at the higher end, are not able to do that. Billy! A+. Like, hands down. Billy is insane. Billy is in such a good position right now. Mobility is king in Dead by Daylight. It is one of the best things that you can possibly have for the game. Even with anything else, like, even if you took away, like, his ability to, like, chainsaw in one hit, he'd still be a very solid killer because of mobility. But with all the extra changes that happened to him a long time ago, he's just a dominating force in DBD, and a good Billy, even against a good Swift, is going to be doing pretty well. I don't know if I'd ever put him in S tier. I don't think I would have ever had him in S tier, and I don't think he's necessarily, like, the strongest in A+ tier. I know a lot of people might disagree, might think he's, like, the third best, but I think against good Swifts, he will falter a little bit. But mobility is just so brutal that, like, even chewing through enough resources can make Billy a monster. He's definitely up there in terms of one of the best killers in the game. And you know what? Billy deserves it. Nurse! Do I need to say more? Nurse, like, basically breaks Dead by Daylight as a whole. One of the things that's nice is she, like, even with nerfs that she's had, it brought her more in tune, but she will always be like the #1 killer in DBD unless they heavily nerf her or come out with some new really, really strong killer. She can ignore complete tile loadouts, not tile loadouts, but like tile placements. She breaks the game in an area. Whenever you are playing against her, you're going for line of sight and mind game. Like mind game line of sights is what you're looking for. The best thing you can do against Nurse is never get into a chase with Nurse. Stealth play is the way. And I don't think we talk about stealth play enough whenever we talk about like survivors who are good. That's something else I want to do a video on later on. Stealth play is very, very important in Dead by Daylight, and people sleep on it, but it is like the #1 thing you need to know how to do when you're playing against Nurse. Myers just got a buff. Is Myers any better now in terms of not D tier? I might move him later. I think he's still D tier. He's a basic attack killer. This is really hard. His stalk is really, really good and catch people off guard, and that can snowball out somewhat well. But going against like good groups, the changes don't really do much for him because they weren't in chase like changes. He gets tier 3 more often. That's kind of the extent of it. His tier 1 and tier 2 were buffed. Like you might be able to justify maybe C tier at some point, but I'm still not any more scared of Myers than I was when he was nerfed. If I'm playing against Myers, like you're normally fine. And a good group's probably gonna run Myers over. The only time you can really justify like moving Myers upwards is probably me with like Tombstone. I'm not trying to keep too much mind with this tier list in terms of like add-ons and like best builds and moving everything around. Like what is the best everything could ever be? If you're probably doing like a really best everything with Myers, you probably can jump up to C tier. Because again, if you're going against a good group and they don't know you have Tombstone, they're just gonna hop in a locker, and then your Tombstone's useless. Hag is weird. Hag is incredibly strong. But now, Hag is also a lot weaker than she used to be. I'm going to put her right now for A tier. I think I might move her later to like B tier. Hag is still really, really strong. She did get a nerf a long time ago, which is going to definitely make her lower end of A tier. Before, you had to have a flashlight in order to get rid of her traps. Now, you can just kind of get rid of them by doing a small action over time. But she is one of the like scariest snowball killers that can happen in a game, and she's really good at like securing out a location. And for a killer that doesn't have like a base mobility, her traps are her mobility. She does really well what she kind of is aiming to do. For a trap killer, she's definitely going to be probably the best trap killer for quite some time. Doctor's relatively weak, especially against like good groups. I'll put him in C tier. He does have slowdown. He does have information. He does have like anti-chase. His anti-chase isn't very strong. There is some things you can do with it. He does have a little bit of slowdown thanks to his static blast and putting survivors into madness, which then again gives him great information. Information is also king in Dead by Daylight, but not as much as mobility. And he has absolutely no mobility. Huntress. Huntress will probably be closer to the middle or lower side of B tier when I'm done here. But Huntress herself is definitely a solid killer. She's not as good as she was. Maps have really hurt Huntress. There's always something now that you can kind of put in between you and Huntress, and it's not really an intimidating killer to go against anymore compared to what she used to be back in like the old days. In the old days, she was like an A tier killer. Maps were a little bit more open. There wasn't debris everywhere. There was just a lot of things that were working out for Huntress, whereas now maps make a really big deal, and a lot of the maps are just not very good for Huntress. And even with like the newer maps coming out with like double like palette into like jungle gyms, it's just not a good area for Huntress right now. But she's still really strong, and in the right hand, she's nasty. Like if you are like a Huntress main and you're pulling off some like the orbital shot, she's one of the most rewarding killers. So again, doesn't have to be the best, but that's where I think her power level is currently. Bubba, against a really good group, Bubba's probably hovering in B tier. And the reason I say this is Bubba, like I have seen some Bubbas who can really understand the chainsaw mechanic and really know how to do the moon saws. And if I'm assuming for the tier list that we're at least talking about good players all around, I am going to assume that Bubba has a lot of potential. The downside is Bubba does not have mobility. And Bubba, if you take him to a vault, guess what? You're kind of fine. There are mind games that you can pull off with Bubba that I think are really, really good. I think there's a lot of potential in Bubba that people kind of sleep on. I would never put Bubba in the same category like lower. The insta-down is very threatening. He is a relatively easy killer to loop, but a good Bubba is actually insanely scary. He's taking on really good teams even. Like there are a lot of stuff where Bubba's doing relatively well. So I think Bubba's probably like a secret, not OP, but like undervalued killer right now. I don't know if I'd ever take him to A tier. Again, not enough mobility, not enough like slowdown or pressure. Like you can still just out I mean, you can still like out-gen Bubba, for example. Like even if Bubba's really, really good, you can probably out-gen him. And that's kind of like the same thing with like all these killers that are here. Even if they're really good chase power, you probably can out-gen them relatively well. Freddy rework. And this is who I'm going off of. The Freddy rework was great. A lot of fun. He has mobility. He has a little bit of a chase power now that makes it feel a little bit better. The slow's potent. He also has like a different slug potential coming out that I think will be addressed, by the way. I don't think the slug thing is going to be the best way to play him. I'm going to put Freddy, I think, right here. I'm going to put Freddy right here right now. I don't think he can ever make it to A tier. He can't really mind game his teleport anymore. His teleport still has quite the cooldown. Mobility means a lot. His chase power is a lot better than it once was. But the pallets that are explodable, you're not getting value on the pallets. You were already going to get value on those pallets. You're going to be able to ignore them unless they buff it up. If they buff like the pallets, he might bump into A tier. If they bump up the teleport, he might bump up a little bit into A tier. I would normally wait into doing like the Freddy rework until like it actually went live, but I am horribly forgetful, and this tier list would just simply not get done because I promised tier lists after every single killer, and then like behavior mentions something else, and I always postpone it. I think right now, when I played him in the PTB, I put him at a very solid B tier. I don't think he has like an insanely high skill cap. So this is a good and bad thing. It's a bad thing because I don't think he ever goes much higher than B tier. But it's a good thing because it means you have less room for mistakes, and that's actually a really big deal whenever you're playing like a killer. Like if you're playing Nurse and you make a mistake, that's going to feel really horrible. But Freddy, not making a lot of mistakes. You're not heavily punished for making a simple mistake. It definitely didn't feel that way when I was playing him in the PTB. Pig. I like Pig. I like Pig a lot. Pig's not good. She's better than Myers, but only because she has game slowdown. Then again, Myers with add-ons, I think, just overtakes Pig completely. But when we just start like a base level or a base understanding of killers, even if they're good, Pig has one of the better slowdowns in the game in terms of like a power. The problem is like when you deal with good survivors, and I mean like good survivors, getting a down is not going to be very quick. You definitely can't play as much hit and run because she has no mobility. Her actual dash is not a power. Her power really just comes down to, well, you know, the reverse bear trap and the pressure that it brings. But her dash isn't that impactful, and it never has been. And I don't know if it ever will be. That's my worry, is like Pig could use a lot of buffs. Unfortunately, they really like hammering home nerfs with Pig. So if Nurse is ever too strong, we make sure to nerf Pig. That way Pig never becomes that strong. Again, you can do some crazy things with Pig, and people can make Pig look really, really good. Heck, I've even taken a build that was like all pallet build and took it for like 10. I think we're still on a win streak with that build, and haven't taken a loss with it yet. But that does not mean anything when we talk about like the 1%, 2% of like high level gameplay of DBD that you will encounter. I would not want to take Pig with most builds into that kind of scenario. Now, she can win those games, but I'm like, in terms of like, who would I take into these games? It's never going to be Pig. And a good group should be able to come through and pretty much wipe her. Clown! Clown's an interesting one. Clown doesn't have mobility, but he has insanely good chase. And by insanely good, I guess I mean like comparative. He does have movement speed. I think there's a lot of things that can be done with Clown. I just don't know if I'm ever going to put Clown above D tier. You know, maybe he will. Maybe in like low, like C tier. Clown can actually be pretty nasty. You can't really outplay him on long tiles. You can't really outplay him on tiles in general. You're normally pre-drop and pray against Clown, and then you play on the tiles from there. Yellow bottles are really dirty. People sleep on yellow bottles all the time. Clown, though, never goes up to B, never goes past here. With his add-ons, he never goes anywhere else, I don't think. I think he's always stays in C, whereas like Myers and like Pig can kind of move around a little bit based on like add-ons. He does have some good add-ons with Invigoration or Reading. People, whenever I watch them play Clown, or when I do coachings for Clown, they never are utilizing the Invigoration bottles, which is like one of the worst things you could ever do. Clown is underrated in terms of the idea of like low tier killers, but he's a very solid killer and he's very simple. Spirit, A+ tier. Spirit is Spirit. Like, I mean, Spirit is just a... outside of the bugs, which are the sound bugs, going against a good spirit is one of the most like miserable things and one of the most helpless things like in the game. You will feel like you were absolutely helpless going against a good spirit. The ability to ignore a lot of the tiles in the game because she can kind of put you into a 50-50 on a lot of areas. There are a lot of things that come into the game where you can kind of use like Iron Will, but now we have a lot of things that can also just exhaust you so you get no value out of Iron Will, which is kind of like the only counter when you're in chase against a spirit. A good spirit is a monster and will always be a monster, unless they nerf her more in the future, but I don't think so. Legion. Legion. C tier, I think. I could bump Legion to C tier with... How do I want to look at it? I actually don't mind Legion. I can actually play Legion to, I think, a really, really good level. But again, there are a lot of things that come into the game where Legion becomes incredibly weak. So think of Legion in terms of like when you think of Plague, except for now he has like 0 anti-loop. Now, with add-ons, I actually think he gets a lot more value. So if you're talking like Iridescent and maybe Susie's, I think Susie's, might not be Susie, might be Julie's, whichever one you get stunned and then you get Vault again right away, can be really dirty and gives him a lot more chase potential. So, and he's a very ease of access killer. He gets, like, if you're ever a new player, Wraith, Legion, amazing killers to get your foot in the door. But when you're dealing with like really top level, Legion's gonna fall short pretty much all around. You'll be able to get that first hit, which feels really good. There is something I would like to say about Legion that people normally don't think about. He has an insane information kit. So if you have someone hooked and you see someone else, you hit them with Feral Frenzy, and you get information around the area, it allows you to be able to make choices like whether or not someone's coming for the save, where they're at coming from the save, and maybe you can force different plays. But now we have different hook timers, which also punishes that even more. So it's definitely in a weird spot. I don't think information is as strong as it used to be with Legion, whereas like before, I think I had Legion in C tier. I think right now, if I was going against like top notch with like all meta stuff kind of out there, I think Legion's gonna fall, unfortunately, really, really flat. And again, I think with his eerie pin, he bumps up to C tier though. Like, for sure, I think. Plague or Reno. Plague is good. He's not A+ good. He's like A good? Let me think. I'll put Plague in A. You're gonna be injured all game. She has one of the strongest snowballs in the game, and completely. Her Corrupt Purge can be a game ender, and she always gets one now. Before, she never, like, you could choose to completely shut down her power. Now, she is guaranteed to at least get a little bit of corrupt value or the potential. And she has really good add-ons that can really help her out. I try not to go too much into the idea of like add-ons whenever I do a tier list because it makes things, it's like super complicated, but she can definitely move around in A tier and maybe even a little higher whenever it comes down to like including her add-ons, because her add-ons are actually really, really good. They can give you like perma information on aura reading. There's a lot of things you can do. Corrupt Purge is one of the scariest perks. One of the scariest powers you can go against a survivor because it is incredibly hard to dodge, and normally everyone's staying injured against her. So she gets a lot of value off of that. That being said, she is a killer that can fall to being out-genned. Even if you are a really, really good Plague, the clock going against you can really hurt you. So I don't think she can ever break it into like A+ tier. No, like just her kit can never make it, I think, any higher than A tier. Ghostface. Ghostface got some changes. Ghostface is still weak. Ghostface is still pretty weak. I don't know if I would actually say he's the worst stealth killer in the game. I think he actually might beat out Myers now. Oh, it's really hard. Add-on wise, Myers stomps Ghostface because he has just like a massive spike. He can perma expose the entire game. With like normal games or like talking like normal strong builds, I think we're looking in this area. But Ghostface gets more value out of stealth, which I think is going to play a key part. He can also 9-9 people who are unsuspecting and then play around it. Good Ghostface players are actually really horrifying to go against, but not if you're within a really good SWIP. He has no mobility. He can set up really good plays. Like, Ghostface can be really good in the right hands. But I would say if you're playing against a really good group, you're going to lose more games than you're going to win, or it's just not going to be comparative to, like, any of the other killers on the roster. That being said, if you're a Ghostface main, you know a lot of different stock angles. I love playing Ghostface. Whenever he's one of my favorite killers actually to sit down and play because of like the different like stock angles that you can take and like really catch survivors off guard. But against like a coordinated team in any level, I think Ghostface just kind of falls apart. And I would normally put him above Pig for the potential of like downing people. But when she downs someone, he at least gets the Pig trap, which kind of slows the game down. It's definitely a hard area in here in which like he would be better or not better. The reveal mechanic can be really, really wonky and weird. It can actually be like really game-breakingly weird. I hope eventually we get some in-game changes to maybe like give some of the killers mobility. I would love the idea of like the Knights map where you have like the 2 portals, but only killers can take them. And I think this would actually help a lot of these lower end killers if they could just get around the map a little bit quicker. Demogorgon. I like Demo Puppers. Demo Puppers is not in a good position right now. I don't think he's B tier anymore. This is the weird thing. I don't think Demo is B tier anymore. I think he's still a good killer. Like he's like the initial jack of all trades. But now, like if you compare him to like Xeno, his portals aren't as good. They take setup time. Hell, like even Lifeguard Whistle got nerfed. His shred has been basically countered out by most good survivors, or they're just gonna eat the hit in general. The newer maps that have came in are now more palette dense, which is also a really strong thing against Demogorgon. So like when, for example, if you're playing against like an old Demogorgon, there wasn't as many palettes on like a general map, whereas today there's a lot more palettes. They might not be as safe, but they are still relatively, against Demo, you can pre-drop them and be pretty good. And then again, he just starts losing time. He does have mobility. Because mobility has to set up. And it's like, well, hey, like what if survivors like get rid of it? Survivors normally aren't going to get rid of it. You want to encourage survivors to get rid of it, and you can find ways to do that. But good groups are normally going to like just pre-distance you really, really hard. He doesn't do good on like a good variety of maps. You can take him to like Larry's, Erie, like a lot of the maps are like solid for Survivor, are really good against him. It's just like as time has went on, he's gotten like kind of hindered by like the maps. And that's really what it comes down to. I might move him later. He does have a chase power. He does have mobility. But where I think right now, if I was going against a really good group, you're going to have a really rough time if you're trying to play him at like the level of like, again, think of Xenomorph. Xenomorph is literally like a better Demogorgon, like 2.0. Oni's A tier. Oni's always A tier. Oni is always A tier and up. Oni, unfortunately, it's one of these weird things. Free power Oni, worst experience you'll ever have in the game. Power Oni, the best killer in the game by a mile. There's no beating Oni in his power. Like, there is beating him, but what I'm saying is, like, it is one of the largest power spikes that you can possibly have in the game. Now, this is why, if you ever look at, like, high-end play, the number one thing that you'll see, like, Oni players normally bring, play with your food, bamboozle, like, brutal strength, something along those lines, because survivors are pre-dropping, holding forward as much as possible, and doing anything to avoid being hit, because they don't ever want power to go to Oni. So you play incredibly safe compared to most killers in the game. Like, you will pre-drop a mile against Oni and just hold forward, because that's what it takes to not let a good Oni get his power. Good Oni gets his power. Every time you hear him like Hulk out, that could be a game-ending situation. And that is why Oni will always be A tier and above. But in a normal game of Dead by Daylight, I think you can actually out-gen Oni fairly easily. The problem is, like, man, those good Oni players, and if we're assuming everything here is pretty good, he's always A tier and up. He always has potential. You could be at 1 gen, 0 hooks, and game goes, because you get everybody. Deathslinger. I like Deathslinger. Deathslinger's probably C tier. I love Deathslinger. Deathslinger is one of my favorite range killers. I think he is my favorite range killer in the game. I pulled off some nasty shots with Deathslinger. The problem is Deathslinger literally falls to, he is a 1v1 killer at base. He can't really, it's not like Huntress where like someone comes in the way, you like hit them, then hit the other person. You get so much more value relatively quickly, where like Deathslinger is like the 1v1 killer. And that can be a negative thing. You could be the best Deathslinger in the world and lose to a team who's just very, very gen efficient. Even if we're bringing like meta to meta. Deathslinger just does not have pressure or mobility to affect the game in a macro sense. This is why normally if you are playing Deathslinger, one of the best things you always keep in mind is you need to get people out of the game. Deathslinger is one of the most rewarding killers in the game. He can shoot through insane like small holes and like pull them to him. Again, don't ever take the tier list in terms of like a killer can't be fun or good in the right hands. But whenever it comes down to like dealing with really, really like god groups, you're just gonna get out-gen. You could have like incredibly fast chase time and still get out-gen on this killer. Pyramid Head. Pyramid Head will always be A tier. And there's one reason why. They're kind of like we were just talking about with Deathslinger, how everything is a 1v1. Pyramid Head puts you in the 1v1 and tells you to basically your anti-tunnel perks don't work. So Pyramid Head is going to do his best to get you tormented. He's going to hook you. He's going to go to like, he might move around a little bit. He might hook you or cage you. And he's going to go to where you are or wait until you get saved. And he's going to down you, then cage you. And he's going to go to the cage and then kill you again. Now his add-ons, he will never go up to A+ tier or down. His add-ons suck. But Pyramid Head has the only ability in the game to completely deny like anti-tunnel. And it's one of like the insane things that actually keeps him really strong. His power isn't necessarily strong. It is really strong, but a lot of survivors have found out how to make almost every tile a 50-50. And most good Pyramid Heads are very patient. It's a patient kind of killer. But his ability to actually tunnel somebody out of the game and ignore a lot of the perks along the way, ignore saves, ignore perks, like there is no stopping a Pyramid Head on like the one-on-one if he's landing his shots and if he has enough pressure in the game. And that's how he pressures. He does put the 1-to-1, but Deathslinger would still have to worry about like decisive, off the record, stuff like that. Pyramid Head can kind of just ignore it, at least once or twice with off the record. Blight will always be S tier. I can't ever imagine them nerfing him enough to where he's not S tier. Blight is mobility plus damage, so his mobility is lethal. It is always. Blight can play around almost every single tile in the game. If you pre-drop, it doesn't matter. He can still play around it. He has insane mind games that he can even do with Red Stain. So nothing is ever safe with Blight, much like Nurse. The best thing to do against Blight is to not be found by Blight. That is the best way of playing against Nurse and Blight, is to simply never be in chase with them. Their add-ons are also relatively well. His add-ons have been nerfed, but they're still pretty good. And they're still pretty different. Poor Pyramid Head is crying in the corner right now. You've seen people argue Billy versus Blight since it's mobility and insta-down. Yeah, but unfortunately, I pre-drop against this. I probably don't get hit on most tiles in the game. I pre-drop against this. He actually can like bump logic me and still hit me. Twins. I think I'm gonna have a bad take or a hot take on Twin. How do I want to do? What kind of take do I want to do on Twin? Twins is hard for me because I bounce back and forth so much with Twins. But I think, and this is a very hot take. I think Twins are in a bad spot. They're still really strong. Like they're still really, really strong. Are they A tier? They might be on the bottom side of A tier. I don't even think Twins is honestly A tier. I might move her to B tier. But against good groups and good Twins, hold Victor. If you're ever playing against Twins, hold Victor until she takes it. But the problem is it's still very impactful. She still has one of the highest snowballs in the game thanks to Victor. You can send him around and get a lot of value. I think that's why she's going to stay in A tier. She's not as strong as sometimes people give her credit for, especially with newer perks in the game like We're Gonna Live Forever. Botany's pretty solid. Healing right now is really, really good. You're seeing a lot more, even at higher levels, of survivors doing 2 and 2. What this means is if you ever down somebody as Victor gets kicked and they heal that survivor before you ever get over there. This is the best way to play against Twins. You're almost always doing 2v2, but now it's become more of like a modernized, even like higher levels or even a comp, you're actually seeing a lot more 2 and 2s kind of going off. Whereas before, you might be seeing 1-1-1 across the board or 1-2-1, where you're not seeing that as much now. I don't think she can ever hit A+ tier. She just doesn't. It seems weird, but I just don't think she actually is as strong as she used to be. And I think it's just because the game has kind of changed. Maps have changed. Perks have come out that make her a little bit weaker. She's still solid. She's still good. And a good Twins player is always scary. But like they've even gotten rid of some things like Snipe Victor, for example. They put a lot of like hidden walls up where like Victor will hit stuff, or hitboxes being really, really wonky. There's a lot of things that mess with Twins, and I think that hinders them. I would like to see a not so buggy DBD, and maybe I'll revisit this. I don't think she can ever go to B tier. Now that I look at it, I just think she has too much pressure potential. But I don't know if she can ever go to A+ tier. I don't think she can handle the pressure or the mobility of like Billy and Spirit. But that's my thought. Trickster sucks, but I can't give him D tier because they buffed his movement speed. I guarantee you there'll be at least somebody who's mad at me about putting Trickster below Deathslinger or lower, or Trickster's bad. He suffers inefficiency at like every level. Most maps are not that good for Trickster. Anything with like a high wall or a rock, or anytime you can force Trickster just to basic attack you, it's really good. You can kind of just ignore his power at some of these tiles. Now, if he gets a good map like Autohaven with like low walls, Trickster will be a nightmare to deal with because he'll just destroy you. The problem is like the majority of the maps you can actually play against him really easily. The maps kill Trickster on almost every level. You can really just move away from Trickster and kind of ignore his power. I'm gonna say a lot during this, but Trickster, I like Trickster in a sense, but he's inefficient, and inefficiency is a real killer. So he has to reload quite a lot. Everything you do about Trickster tends to tick away at your game time. But I will say, if you're ever playing in like a really high level, or like you're playing very serious and you do manage to like camp somebody, he's a very scary killer to try and like save from a camp because of his main event being so incredibly strong. But you're going to get outgunned on this killer. You're going to have a lot of frustrations whenever you get like really bad maps. And just these things are going to make Trickster's like normal gameplay really rough. But if you give him something like a small map that has low hanging walls, the killer jumps really quickly. The problem is the vast majority of the maps aren't that. The vast majority of the maps hurt him, much like a vast majority of the maps are hurting Huntress right now. Range killers are not in the best spot thanks to maps and normally mobility issues, which he used to suffer even more from. He used to be 110, he's 115 now. And there's so many times when you're chasing as Trickster, it'd actually be faster for you just to basic attack the survivor. Good Tricksters are always fun to watch, but it's very unlikely that you're getting some of the trick shots that you think you've seen. So for example, there's some really fun trick shots that can happen in Shack, but it requires them to be one hit away from being injured, running around, making sure there's even a hole in Shack, throwing through this like tiny hole. Like it's not happening. It's not like Deathslinger where you can kind of set up a predated shot and reel someone in and get a little bit more value there. He does have high pressure spike moments, but main event isn't controllable. So most of the time you're wasting your main event and you're not getting good value out of it. Fortunately, Trickster is just not in a good spot. I'm really not sure what they can do outside of like an actual good rework for him that would actually make him feel good but not over-tuned. He's a very hard killer to balance because he becomes very quickly not busted, but feels very miserable to play against. And even now, a lot of people feel miserable playing against Trickster. But in the reality of things, he's just not as strong as the vast majority of killers in the roster. Nemesis! Nemesis. Oh, I like Nemesis, but Nemesis isn't that good. Oh, what to say about Nemesis? Nemesis is fun. Nemesis is a really fun killer. Nemesis requires, on average, 3 hits to down a survivor. That's not good. Nemesis has like a wind-up time in order to like get going in the game. Once Nemesis hits tier 3 and everyone's kind of infected, Nemesis is insanely horrifying. The hinder effect came in. He did receive some buffs, but I don't think it's ever going to really be able to move. He'll never be able to move into A tier. It's just, I don't think it's possible. He doesn't have the mobility for it, and he takes too long to get online. One of the best things you can do with Nemesis is actually to fake your power early on and like punch somebody, and then if you can possibly get a hook. Because so many survivors when you're playing as Nemesis are always they're never going to drop a pallet. They're going to greed until you like get to them. Once Nemesis hits tier 3, he's an A tier like chase killer, but he still has no mobility. So he just gets outgunned. Zombies are basically useless in every single game. Maybe 2 out of 10 games your zombies would be helpful. The bright side of Nemesis is he doesn't really struggle on per map. Like his map pools, if it's an indoor map, he's an insanely cool killer because zombies become like really solid. Every other map, it's pretty much just normal. He has the same struggles as any other killer, and like big maps are always rough. But that's like every killer on the roster, right? Big maps aren't always the best, but for Nemesis, they're a little bit more punishing because zombies are literally useless at that point. He's still a fun killer, still really good, still has one of the better chase powers in the game. The problem is he takes too long to get online. I think actually Bubba is just better in terms of getting like online and getting pressure like right off the rip. Towards endgame, like, yeah, nothing really seems to push him above B tier. And I do think new Freddy will be stronger than him. And I do think Wraith is actually probably stronger than Nemesis as well. But mostly because of the fact that you're able to keep pressure up on survivors. And remember, I'm biased whenever it comes down to Wraith. So, you know, you can hate me. Pinhead. Pinhead is actually in a really bad spot. I don't know if he's actually lower than Huntress. He has game slowdown. But I don't know if he's actually stronger than Nemesis. Pinhead is like the exact definition of high skill, low reward. It's not exactly easy to land your chains, and even when you do, you get pretty heavily punished. His add-ons can definitely bump him up really high into B tier, but he never goes into A tier. He does have a little bit of mobility thanks to taking the box, but unfortunately, it's mobility on wherever you want to hit, wherever you want to chase against the Pinhead. So if you're going against like the game, they're going to take you to like the drop down, and they'll just make you teleport. If you do teleport to them, they'll punish you there. He does have one of the best like slowdown mechanics in the game in terms of being able to basically bring the game to an absolute halt whenever chain hunt goes off. And one of the big things of learning Pinhead is box logic. This means you're chaining your boxes where you basically have like perma chain hunt. Against good groups, you're probably not having it. They're going to be too spread out. You're not going to be able to probably get a good read on where everyone is. Though to be fair, if you are a really good Pinhead, I think you can take him pretty far and you can win a lot of games with Pinhead. It's just like his power just doesn't give you a lot of value for like the skill that it takes. I think they need to give him an extra chain or two whenever he lands his power, or they need to make his impaling wire base kit. Nothing feels worse than when you land like a nice snag on Pinhead and then like a tree gets in the way and all three of them just break and you get no value. So you're just against like good solid players. They're just going to utilize, or they'll have a teammate come through and just break them. And then it's just like, oh, well, okay. Well, screw me for utilizing this power that's actually relatively hard to hit. So his chase power, not very good. Hopefully he does have a like rework coming up or some changes coming up in the future that we will see. And that will be really good. Or at least I'm really banking on that. I'm really banking he gets some love in the future. Artist. Artist is A tier. Artist is like... The thing is, like, Artist is one of those, like, skill killers. I actually think Artist is really top-notch. In the right hands, Artist is absolutely a monster. She can shut down every single tile in the game. She forces you to hold W, but she can even counter your hold W with extra crows. Like, she has a lot of potential. She's one of the killers in the game that probably has the most potential. Now, that being said, there are some map problems, which if you get one of the maps, she drops very quickly. Double layer maps kill Artists. So if you're like RPD, or if you are on like even the game, you can have a really, really hard time with like any like long-term snipes. But her in chase like crows are dirty. You're always holding forward and basically getting hit, even if you do. But even if you do, she can still crow you and down you anyway. If someone gets in the way, well, she can hit you with a crow on top of it. She's currently the best range killer in the game. Not what I would consider like the most range killer. A lot of her things can be avoided, but she has such potential that I think can warrant her up at a higher end of A tier. But depending on maps you get, can definitely drop her anywhere else into A tier. I am going to move some of these killers around afterwards. I'm kind of just placing them as I go, and then I'll like readjust it really quickly. But they're all going to hover in their zone. Sadako. Sadako's C tier. Is she better than Trickster at pressure? Yeah, she has more mobility. She's probably better than Clown. She just has a lot of pressure that gets out there because of her mobility and ability to threaten. I think she's actually a really solid killer. And I would say, I don't know if Deathslinger is necessarily a top of C tier. He's pretty good, but actually I'd say Sadako's relatively better than Deathslinger. Sadako's just around the map everywhere, and she has constant pressure. Slug playstyle obviously was really good. I think she's a relatively solid stealth killer. Her mobility is, again, mobility is such a strong component whenever we talk about like Dead by Daylight. But on top of this, she's giving you a condemn, which gives her slowdown. And you have to respect the condemn, because very quickly, if you're not respecting the condemn, you can immediately be put to like 7 and be taken out of the game. But she's a weak chase killer. She has like absolutely like 0 chase value in terms of being able to like mind game survivors. She does have just so much mobility though, that I think she will like make up for it in a mobility alone. Condemn is really solid, but it's not as strong as it used to be. And I don't think I'd ever put her any higher, even with like add-ons. Add-ons don't really help her in terms of like moving her power potential. She can go down a little bit depending on like certain maps, but she'll always hover in C tier. At least for like right now, I think. I do think she probably puts out more pressure than Deathslinger, but Deathslinger has like 10 times better chase. Dredge! Oh. I want to say I'm a little biased with Dredge, but I'm also not. Dredge is such a weird one. How do I want to place Dredge? I don't know if Dredge is actually A tier. But he has the potential to be A tier. He has mobility. He has a relatively good chase power. He has good level spikes. He hovers probably at the end of A tier. Maybe high B. But he has mobility. He has very high powers with the nighttime. The problem is like his chase power isn't necessarily the best. And he can get outgunned relatively well. But he's one of the most adaptive killers in the game. The problem is his chase power. And on certain setups, this can create a really, really big issue. So if you're dealing with like a 4-wall into shack, and you're like, okay, I'm gonna set my remnant down here at like a corner of like, if you're gonna set like a remnant down over here, a good survivor is gonna run this way and just hold forward. And if you put your remnant here, they'll run this way and just hold forward. He falls into this really weird area of constantly being held forward against, which can create a like epitome of problems. He feels good, like even on paper, he's insanely good. He's insanely good. And I think he can hover around every single map. There are map dependencies that can kill him. I think Larry's has like really bad locker spawns. Haddonfield can have really bad locker spawns. But he can adapt really, really well and spike really, really well. I think he probably hovers here. I might move him down to like B tier. Because I don't know if he ever has the chase potential to keep up with like Pyramid Head, Plague, Twins, Oni, like Hag. He just isn't that kind of level of chase. But he has such insane mobility that you can almost make up for it. If I'm going against a really good group who knows how to hold forward, I probably would actually put Dredge B. Seems weird, I know, because I was actually hovering at A, but now that I think about it, whenever I think of like good, top-notch groups, I don't know if I really want Dredge out of like the roster compared to these guys. And most of that is just because I've played a lot of Dredge. I would say I'm a very competent Dredge, a very solid Dredge. And even if you're utilizing Remnant in very, very incredibly like good ways, there are so many things that can hurt the Remnant. Survivors coming in and taking the Remnant from you. Talking about good groups, taking like Remnant from you, or in general just holding forward to like every single tile. You can lose the game relatively quickly out from under you. But he has a lot of potential, so he hovers in such a weird way. I do think he's better than Freddy though, like for sure. Wesker, I might be a little biased, but I think Wesker's A tier. He's like the jack of all trades done right. He can play around a vast majority of tiles. He has slowdown built into his kit that has to be kind of respected. He has a little bit of everything that works for him. He has mobility in general. He can double, again, he has everything. Is it going to be as good as like up here? No, but he has like everything. He has good mobility. He can play around tiles, has the slowdown. He has a little bit larger of a terror radius, which doesn't really hurt him. He's still 115. I can't think of negatives for this guy. He doesn't really have a lot of map weaknesses. And with hug teching and rebound teching, he can get really ridiculous stuff. So like his skill cap is just really, really high. But he's such a really strong killer in just the right hands on almost every level. I don't think he's going to be as good as like Artist when it comes down to like dealing with like high-end good groups. But he is like, you have to respect a good Wesker, even if you're a good group. Knight! Oh. I'm going to preface this. I like Knight. Alright? I do enjoy Knight. Knight's not good. Knight is probably one of the easier killers to go against. He's not fun, but he's not good. He doesn't have a lot of mobility. He's very predictable. You can basically make his power completely useless. He can like stall out games relatively well. You can do a lot of things to where like you run into a pallet if you're being chased, not a pallet but a vault, and then like just run into it and run away from it, and the guard has to do the same thing, making it impossible to really get hit. He does have potential in like chases there, but he's just not a very good killer. Even when you take like add-ons into effect, he's gonna go up a little bit, but I don't think he's ever gonna leave C tier. He feels better to play, and there is some potential there, but it's all really predictable potential. Like, really, really, hard area for, I think, Knight to ever get past this point. And to be fair, I actually think Trickster probably would be better than him. The chase potential is just going to be better. Trickster does better, like, securing an area, does better at, like, stopping survivors from saving. Like, he just does better. This is Skull Merchant. She's bottom. She's the worst killer in the game by far right now. Skull Merchant. Behavior literally wants to convince players that the rework will be good, but they don't want people to hate her just from before, so they intentionally took her out back, shot her, spit on the people who like playing her, kicked her in the face, threw her down into the dumps. They tried bodying her up and throwing her into a river, and she kind of barely survived. But again, I could create an F tier here, but she's just the worst killer in the game by far. You can completely ignore this killer. If you're DCing against this killer, I think you're just a goober. She's not strong. She's incredibly weak. They literally gimped this killer. Hux. A+. Hux is insane and has insane potential and can deal with very, very high-end groups and has mobility to confront it. He does play a little bit of a weird playstyle in terms of like utilizing slug, but Hux has everything you could ever want in a killer. The problem of Hux, and this will make what most Huxes, even myself, go down from A+, is that the amount of mental strain that you need to play Hux to like such an insane level is probably where you're not playing him consistently well. So one of the things I've said down here before with killers like Wraith, with killers like Freddy, with killers like just these more simple killers, is that your room for error is a lot less. But your room for error with Singularity is insane. How do I call him? Hux. Singularity or Hux. However you want to look about it. Singularity just does so much thanks to like Slipstream. The buffs helped him out a lot, feeling a lot better. There are even mind games you can pull off that allow him to completely ignore pallets or tiles or things that would normally be safe zones for survivors. There are add-ons just make him stronger. Like, there's not really a weak spot of Singularity outside of like what the player does. He can completely like zone off survivors. He can shut down a 3-gen really hard. He can be everywhere on the map at the same time. He can do a lot. Basically, it's just kind of depending on the hands of who's playing Singularity, but he does really, really well. Xenomorph. All right, I might be biased again. I've played a lot of Xenomorph. I think Xenomorph is actually really, really strong. I am going to move some things around. I'm going to move Hag probably closer to the bottom of A tier at the moment. I'd say she's probably at the bottom of A tier when I look at how I've placed some things here. Xenomorph is, I think, very underrated. I think people sleep on Xenomorph. Is he better than Hag? I mean, Plague, though. I don't know if he's better than Plague. Plague's really good because of Corrupt Purge. I think he has potential. All right. I'm going to get yelled at because of what Otz has said versus what I'm going to say. Xeno is good. In the right hand, Xeno's a monster. Even when you take account of the turrets and good turret positioning. I hate to say it, but most good turret positioning you can actually play around. But that's also based on the map. Sometimes out of the maps, like turret positioning is not even a thing because like if you're playing on Larry's, for example, you put it inside one of the rooms, he basically always has an access to get into it. But if you're double layering up on that, you can get good value. Add-ons can fix this, by the way. He can go down here depending on like map layouts. Map layouts can hurt him. Chest spawns, stuff like that. Just depending where his tunnels are at. He does suffer on double layered maps like Eerie, but chase potential wise is insane. He can get around the map very, very quickly. They have a massive, numerous amounts of pressure spots on the map. I think you could handle most good groups with Xeno and feel pretty good. In terms of like people double stacking. Double stacking is great, okay? Double stacking is a cool thing. Double stacking is really fun. Double stacking you can only do in one area. And not always, especially when I watch people playing as and against Xeno, double stacking is great. And even against like good teams, you probably can play around it relatively well. Yeah, you might get broken out of it, but I mean, heck, if you're really, really worried about it, take his brown add-on that completely stomps that out. You can insta-break them, continue the chase, go right back into a thing, get everywhere else. And then don't forget, remember, if survivors are taking the turrets and putting them in locations, they are not on gens. There is a little bit of built-in slowdown to actually put down good turrets. And there needs to be good like synergy in general of where people are putting them and where they're double layering them. This is great. Just remember, everything adds to a little bit of slowdown. Xeno can play around every single tile in the game as long as there's some kind of angle for outside of like maybe a god palette into like a wall around the corner. The tail is very deadly. The tail can go over and then hit people on top of stuff. It is a very, very solid killer. I don't think it's solid like up here solid ever. I don't think Xeno can ever get to like A+ tier, but Xeno can definitely hover in A tier. Maybe B tier on like some really bad maps, but Xeno should be able to handle most things. Eerie and stuff like that are gonna be really rough maps, but the vast majority of maps Xeno can play and feel really good. So I would prefer Xeno over Pyramid Head. I think Xeno can put out more pressure than Pyramid Head, but Pyramid Head I always move around when I'm normally done with the tier list, because Pyramid Head's ability to 1v1 survivors is like literally impossible. Boy, what did they do to my boy? Chucky, my boy. Oh, I feel so bad. I don't agree with like Chucky being like super low. I know people thought like, oh my god, Chucky like nerfed, like he's like CD tier now. I don't think he's CD tier. I think he's like B tier. He's not in a good spot. I still think he's gonna be more efficient at downing survivors than these three. As stealth, the cooldown kills him. I don't know if he can go ever farther because of cooldown. The cooldown is what hurts him. It's not the movement speed. The movement speed nerf really sucked, but the cooldown is what's really hurting him. I think he still downs faster than Nemesis. He still outperforms on Pinhead. He outdowns probably Huntress. He doesn't have any map issues like Huntress does. I think the issue here is that he's now 110 with an insanely long cooldown, and that cooldown makes it really, really rough. And like the cooldown now stops him from ever being A tier. And there was a point in time where he was just insanely high up. I don't think he's ever gonna be C tier. I think he dumpsters most of these killers in pressure, just like via chase. His chase is just that strong. He is like a pure chase killer, but he can utilize it for movement speed. Does still handle could handle like his own against like Spirit, but that was before he got like the double-edged nerfs. The double-edged nerfs are really hard. I don't think he ever goes into C tier. His chase power is still better, I think, than every single person in C tier. And he can utilize his power still for mobility, just a little bit more punished than he used to be. He can play around every single tile in the game. There are exploits you can utilize, but I don't think I'm going to talk about those. He can definitely have some tricky maneuvers. I just think Chucky is not as bad as what people think he is, and I think he's still pretty solid. But he definitely took a massive nerf after being double hammered with CD. Again, it's just the cooldowns that are really hurting Chucky. I don't think the movement speed was actually a horrible idea. I would love to see the cooldown get reverted, at least back to what it was before. Getting reverted definitely moves him closer, or at least makes him feel more at home in B tier. And then on top of that, I'd like to have a little bit more control after scampering under from Slice and Dice. I think those things could actually really, really help him. Not only make him feel better, but quickly scale up the tier list. I'm going to wait on Unknown. I have some hot takes about Unknown. Vecna. Vecna is good. Vecna is B tier. I've played a lot of Vecna. There is a lot of possibilities with Vecna. There's just too much it takes for Vecna to get up and going. And I don't think he's consistent. He is really good in chase, and he does have mobility. He has a little bit of everything. I don't know if I think he's better than Dredge or not. He might be better than Dredge, just because of like some of the elevation tricks that you can do. And again, holding pallets can be really, really solid. And good Vecnas are going to know how to do this. But I just don't think he has... like the problem is, like, if you make one mistake with Vecna, your whole game is like ruined. And it's really easy to make that mistake. So, for example, if you're playing against Vecna and he uses his hand wrong, or he uses his hand and you get to like another pallet, and this is very common. It doesn't mean to be a good or bad Vecna, or good or bad survivor. Assuming this happens, because both are good, you use the hand, it pauses the pallet from being dropped. Survivor manages to guess that you're going to do that, because it's like an obvious play, and then you're going to hold forward and get to another pallet. If you make that mistake, you now only have skeletons, in which are only really, really effective in like 3 different areas. And if you miss the skellies, that chase is done. You are now a base killer who has like absolutely 0 value into the game. You have to either leave chase or you are now committed. There's so many ways that Vecna gets put into a really bad spot. I don't think he's ever gonna be C tier. And he has some really fun ideas. Like, you can, if you have elevation, you can send the skellies out and get like some insane snipes that can't really be dodged. But as survivors have gotten better against, especially Vecna, they have gotten better at like just dodging in the middle now. And people look out for it more, which is good. But I don't think Vecna can actually scale up to A tier. And when he first came out, I thought he had like insane potential, and he still does. Like, in the right hands, like, Vecna is still scary. I just don't think he never hit like A tier scary. Like, I would much rather play Hag against a good group than Vecna. Dracula. I think Dracula's like 5th best, right? I think he's better than Spirit, to be honest. He's better than Spirit. I don't think it's a question. Whether or not he's better than Billy is the question. Dracula is an insane killer. He does what Spirit wants to do, except for he's faster at it. He gets hits right out of the thing. He has Pyramid Head level of like chase on any tile, as long as it's like within like short enough. He has the Wolf, which basically makes him a perma 4.8 killer if he's in chase. Dracula literally has it like all. Dracula is probably, like, again, it's like throwing a whole bunch of killer powers into Dracula, and that is like Dracula. He's a very scary killer. He is a pre-drop and prey killer on almost every area. You're hoping to God you can out-gen him before he makes his way around the map and stomps you out. Dracula is a nasty killer, and I would say, like, when we're talking about these two killers, he's probably outperforming, if I had to guess, Billy. But Billy has better, I think, potential, and still better mobility, better snipes, and in one-shot downs that can be reliable based on like certain maps. Dracula doesn't really hate maps. He's fine on most maps because he has good mobility, he has stealth, he has good chase, he can fire you under, like, you're just always in a bad spot when you're going against this. This is the guy they told you not to worry about. Houndmaster. Houndmaster's really good. The problem I have with Houndmaster, I want to put her in like A+. I think I'm gonna put her at A, but I'm gonna put her right here. I'm gonna put her in A right now. She's just too damn buggy. There's still, like, they fixed a lot of the bugs, but she's still really, really buggy. And I think this creates like a really massive like area that I can't tell if she's better or worse because of the bugs. So, for example, her chase is insane. She has potential on every single chase. People have learned how to play against her a little bit. You can't vault. She's going to tag you immediately on the vault. Search gives you from point A to point B really, really good, and it's a good chase tool if you're utilizing it. She has insanely good add-ons that make her really miserable to go against with miserable builds. If we're looking at that, her add-ons can take her up or down a notch. She has a lot of potential. The problem is, like, if you send a dog on search and then your dog tries coming back and then gets caught behind you, now you don't have a power for 10 seconds, or you have to stop and wait for your power before it goes on cooldown. And then you have, like, the dog runs into something and, like, it hit its toe on a pebble and now it doesn't move. So it's like, there's so many things that just, like, make the killer miserable to play. And this is unfortunately one of the buggiest chapters we ever had, was when she came into the game. And that has been just, I don't know how to say it more than just like really frustrating. It's a really rewarding, really fun killer to play when everything works out, and she's really strong when everything's working out. When a bug happens, any of the number of bugs I just mentioned, or any of the bugs you've seen, can be game-ending bugs, because they can completely take away from like momentum. Anytime you lose momentum in a game, you could basically throw your whole game out. That being said, I think after the bugs get fixed, I think she's hovering definitely in A tier, not feeling bad at all. I think I feel pretty good about that. Unknown. Unknown is such a weird killer. How do I want to look at Unknown? Unknown is Unknown, but I'm trying to think of where I would actually put Unknown. I don't think Unknown goes A+, because a lot of people know how to play against him. I don't think Unknown's stronger than Houndmaster, but you know what? I do think Unknown is better than Artist. And I do think Unknown in the right hands is a filthy killer. Not because of his like range power, but because of his teleports. A lot of Unknown, and the more and more you play Unknown, the thing you learn about him is that you fake his power a ton, get free basic attacks, and then when people are weakened, you get teleports that basically bounce you around the map. And he's so much potential. Like, this killer is a nightmare. I get frustrated with this killer because I want to use his power 24/7. But if you are playing Unknown in a efficient way, and I've done this with like a recent video, whenever I do videos, I'm normally trying to play more efficient. Whenever I'm streaming, I'm normally trying to play for shots. When you're playing Unknown in an efficient manner, the dude's a nightmare. You don't feel like you never do anything, because if you take the pallet, he's gonna weaken you. And it's like, oh, well, I'll just stare at him. Now he teleports away. Oh. He teleports away, hits one of your friends, maybe teleports back like 15 seconds later. He can be around the map. He is really, really dirty. And if, like, good unknown players are one of the scariest things you will ever see in the game. Singularity, really solid. Spirit, still really solid. I'm pretty happy with this placement. I do think I take Ag into B tier. Now that I think about it, mostly not because necessarily like Hag's bad. I do think she's still probably better than Vecna. The problem is like when you deal with Swifts, isn't necessarily like it's just the fact that Swifts will really run through your traps whenever you hook a survivor, and they'll go really wide and take up as much room as they can. And they normally send out someone who's dedicated to like run through your traps, and that can really, really hinder what Hag is capable of. I do still think she's really solid. You can place traps really, really well, but against like good groups, I would still say she's relatively good, and she's gonna be better than most of these killers. I think she's still better than Freddy, but Freddy might be up there, man. Freddy's rough to say, because Freddy does have the slow, he does have the teleport, but you can't cancel the teleport. Hag has the potential, and by that, again, Hag is a snowball killer. You don't just normally like hook one, go. You get your web set out, you play on your web, you put the web in non-obvious places, you get good value. She does good at pretty much every level of play. She does good even in competitive play. She does good everywhere. The problem is that people can get rid of your traps now. They run through your traps. People know how to play against Hag. It's just, there are a lot of things there. But add-on wise also spikes her. So she's a hard killer. She can move around, but I don't think she offers as much as probably what this A tier roster does. And if I'm looking at A tier, I still think Plague's pretty good. Oni's, again, he's just a snowball king. Artist is really good, but is Artist better than like Oni? Probably, because she's like efficient right off from the start. Same thing like Xeno. Xeno's efficient right off the start. I think everyone here is relatively well. Again, I wanted to keep this in like an idea. So like if we're assuming good, not again, whenever I made a tier list, I'm thinking of like add-ons in advance. Are add-ons taking her to this level? Probably not. But they definitely keep her in B tier. So probably not lowering her. Like, do add-ons take Vecna to A tier? I don't think so. Do they still make him a stronger B tier? I think so. Do add-ons take Dredge to A tier? Honestly, maybe. They're pretty stupid fucking add-ons. Add-ons are really, really good. Freddy, are the add-ons going to take him to like A tier? I don't think so. Wraith, are add-ons going to take him to A tier? I don't think so. Maybe. You can maybe argue Wraith, because he has taken comp groups on, but again, how often is he going to win those games versus like Wesker or any of these people here? Yeah. I think that's where I am pretty content. Again, Knight's the only one I'm a little wish-washy on, but yeah. But we can all agree that Scully's the worst killer in the game. Yes. But yeah, if you're talking like add-ons, I think I've placed somewhat correctly. Like add-ons on her aren't moving her. Add-ons on him aren't moving him. Like they're not moving out of C tier, I think, with the add-ons. Now, Myers is a weird one. He might move into C tier with add-ons. Pig might move a little bit into C tier with add-ons. I still think she's pretty solid in terms of like low tier. Legion moves into like high C with like add-ons, but like it's like one eerie. Like that's what's helping him bump so up, because his chase and his other areas are so strong. A good Ghosty is bottom of C. It's like, yeah, it's like I'm a good Ghostface. Like I have a pretty good feeling of Ghostface. I'd still put him like right here. But again, on a good map, on a good area, you might see him move a little bit, but you're not going to see too much movement from, I think, my locations. Or, God forbid, now I have to deal with Shoulder the Burden. Like, there's a lot of things now that I think are a little worse for wear. And I think Pyramid Head's still insanely good against all those things. But to be fair, I think Pyramid Head actually took a little bit of a hit thanks to Shoulder the Burden. That's actually one of the reasons I think I'm going to keep him here. I did think of moving Pyramid Head up a little bit more, because, again, the ability of saying no to, like, certain perks is insane. But Shoulder the Burden, you might actually get gutted on Pyramid Head against good group. Overall, this is my tier list. I think it's pretty accurate. I think everything is here. If you want to idealize like Knight's a little higher here or a little bit, but I still think he's going to sit in C tier with add-ons, without add-ons. Again, Myers might go up a little bit thanks to add-ons, maybe even to C tier if you take like his best add-ons. But I think overall, this is kind of where we're hovering. Oh, by the way, I would say Myers is probably better than Trapper. I like Trapper, but Trapper's just a really, really rough spot right now. But I personally love Trapper. I would take Trapper into a lot of groups. But I think, again, if we take B tier, I don't think any of these killers are ever moving up to like A tier, even with like add-ons. Freddy is still to be determined. I do like Dredge. I'm a little biased towards Dredge. I'd want to put Dredge up here, but there are some like hold forward issues that I think actually really destroy Dredge. And even if you're the best Dredge in the world, I think if I put you against like a comp group, they're gonna show a lot of the weaknesses of Dredge, and then like good Swifts are gonna show those weaknesses as well. Wesker I think is in a good spot. I don't think he's better than Twins. I think Pyramid Head actually. I do think I'm gonna move Pyramid Head down. Shoulder the burden. It weakens Pyramid Head too. You're not always going to keep, you have to hook somebody. And I think that might be an issue. I don't know. I'm a little more hesitant on like Pyramid Head. Just because Shoulder the Burden really confuses me where to put Pyramid Head. I think he's always going to be A tier, but I am a little worried about Shoulder the Burden play being really good against like Pyramid Head's like main reason why he's in A tier. Because you're normally not going to be able to 3-cage somebody. You're going to have to hook them at some point. So I do think there is a worry there. But we'll keep that where it is. Again, I think whenever we talk about these tier lists, I think all these killers are hovering in A, all these killers are hovering B, these killers are hovering in C, D, etc. And again, this only matters in a small percent of your games, but this is my thought overall. I hope it helps out, and I'll make another updated list later on, probably on the next killer, as long as I am good about keeping up with it. Again, feel free to leave anything in the comments. Tell me you hate all my positionings. That's fine. These are my thoughts, my opinions, with like 9,000 hours of gameplay.